So as I'm sure many of you guys know, um, last week, or maybe the week before, um, Donald Trump wanted to take a photo op in front of one of the churches that's around in the DC area close to the White House. And at the current time that he wanted to do that, there were protesters there. And so he had the police in DC um, go and fire rubber bullets at them and fire tear gas at them to clear that area out. And then he went and did his goofy photo up there with holding the Bible upside down and all that. But what we're going to look at right now is this is General Mark Milley, and there was some controversy about him being there when the photo op was taken, and the implications of that were close to having the military involved in quelling the protests because the only other people that were around Trump when he was going to do the photo op were the police, and this guy was there apparently, and the implications of it were that the military was involved in quelling the protests here, and like that the government was using the military against protesters, and it was a big deal. And if that's true, which I don't think it was in this case, that's a really big deal because that goes against, I mean, a lot of rules that we have in our government. One specifically called Posse Comitatus that states that we can't use our federal troops against the American people because, I mean, that's outrageous. But this guy's going to talk about how he's going to apologize for being there when the photo was taken.
Many of you saw the result of the photograph of me at Lafayette Square last week. That sparked a national debate about the role of the military in civil society. I should not have been there. My presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics. As a commissioned uniformed officer, it was a mistake that I have learned from, and I sincerely hope we all can learn from it.
So they're going to talk here about they're going to have one of these contributors talk, and we're just going to skip that and go back to where they start letting him talk again.
And we should all be proud that the vast majority of protests have been peaceful. Peaceful protest means that American freedom is working. And I'm also proud of the response of our National Guard forces, who provided excellent support to local law and state enforcement under the control of state governors in more than 30 states across the country. We never introduced federal troops on the streets of America as a result of the combined efforts of the National Guard and law enforcement at quelling the violence and de-escalating very, very tense situations. We all know that our system in the United States is imperfect, full of passionate debate, and continually evolving. And we in the military will continue to protect the rights and freedoms of all the American people.
So, this guy here, I kind of am a little bit less okay with what he's saying here than I was before because what he was talking about initially was just apologizing for being in the photo, and now he's kind of praising the response that the National Guard had and praising essentially the response of the police that's been to the violence and I mean more to the protests than anything else, which is really kind of gross and really kind of misrepresenting what's actually going on. I mean, everybody has seen the videos of the police just being totally brutal with protesters. I mean, just being outright. I mean, it's really ironic that what we're seeing here is police brutality being used against protesters in a protest about police brutality. I mean, it's really crazy. But this guy's saying he's talking about how he's praising the response of the National Guard. He's praising the response of the police, and I really think that's misrepresentative of what's actually going on because the response of the police has really only gone to show just how bad it is and just how present this mentality of militaristic things going on in the police, and I mean not necessarily with the National Guard but with the police, of course. I mean, we see all these clips of the police and we see them doing all these crazy things and acting like the military, and I mean My theory about it is that a lot of these officers join the police force because they. I'm not saying every officer. I'm just saying a lot of officers can join because they want to live out a fantasy of being in the military. And that's not just my opinion. When you look at these videos of these police being violent and acting like the protesters are terrorists and they're like a counter-terrorist group or something. I mean, we see that clip of them shooting people who are just standing outside their houses, and I really think that there's this mentality in a lot of police forces right now that they're fighting a war against the protesters, or like this is a battle between the police and between thugs and criminals, and that is really showing us how it's really always been that way. How there's a mentality of seeing it as a war on crime, as like there's a battle against from the police battling criminals and battling the people that are causing crime, and not seeing it as a service, but seeing it as war. And this, just the protests themselves, are really showing us that that is how the police and how a lot of people are seeing this as a war between these two groups. And that's really not how it should be seen. I mean, these are protests meant to try and improve America. This is not malicious. This is not an attack. This is meant to make things better. And the police are treating it as if it's battles, as if it's war, as if there's some kind of counterterrorism unit that's stopping people from getting harmed. And in reality, that's not true. But I think that the police reaction in these situations is really just showing us exactly how that presence of the militaristic attitudes among these officers is.